Sometimes you're in that mood where you look at yourself and think, I really need to lose weight. So, how to lose weight and what to do about it? Let's dive into that today. Usually, when you start gaining weight, well, you don't really pay much attention to it. But as soon as you notice those first 3 kilograms, that's basically the right time to start losing weight. And these days, a very trendy topic is various drugs, including Ozempic and others in the GLP-1 group, so-called drugs that act on glucagon-like peptide type 1, which help us lose weight. So do they actually help or not? Let's find out. Now, let's get to the main point. GLP-1 blockers aren't some magic shot. They're just one part of a system. Why? Well, just recently, there was a big meeting of fellow gastroenterologists, dietitians, and nutritionists who clarified all the main points regarding these popular drugs. Indeed, GLP-1 agonists have caused quite a real stir, in treating obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. But the entire expert community warns us that without lifestyle changes, meaning if we only use them, 70% of people will regain the weight within 2 years of stopping. So you'll keep taking the shots, using them, and then 2 years after you stop, the weight will come back. Why? Because it's really just part of a system, not some magic pill or magic shot. For example, here's a surprising fact. Studies show that in people taking GLP-1 without exercise, up to 70% of the weight lost is muscle mass along with fat. So that's something that happens too. And you have to expect that if you don't add, say, exercise to your life while losing weight or using GLP-1, then you might lose muscle mass too. Well, that actually slows down your metabolism if muscle mass is lost and increases the risk of the so-called rebound effect. It's called the yo-yo effect or rebound effect, where after stopping the treatment, the weight comes right back. So there are some simple yet well-known good old rules, but with a new twist for losing that weight. It's especially important not just to follow a restriction like fewer calories, but also to consider some important, seemingly minor details or nuances. Check this out. On one hand, protein is a big deal, and it's the main protector of our muscles. And we need to meet a target of about, 1.5 to 2 grams of pure protein, not protein products, but pure protein per kilogram of body weight. For instance, for someone weighing 80 kilograms, that's about 130 to 170 grams of pure protein daily across all the food they consume. It's worth noting that eggs are considered the best source, of course, because their protein has an amino acid balance that's almost perfect. Cottage cheese, some dairy products, if you're not lactose intolerant, of course, fish, and protein shakes definitely help with weight loss by providing the necessary amount of protein. And protein shakes, again, can come from various sources. It's important to note that people who consume more than 30 grams of protein for breakfast are about a third, or 30%, less likely to overeat during the day. So if you have a good breakfast that's high in protein, you'll feel less hungry throughout the day. And that definitely helps with weight loss. But if you have a light breakfast without protein, like just a bun or a croissant, then you'll want to eat more during the day too. And the chances of overeating later are, of course, much higher. There's also another quite important psychological trick. Well, like the Pareto principle, it also applies to nutrition, 80-20. Meaning 80% of your diet, the bulk of it, should consist of whole foods. But few people know what whole foods actually are. These are foods we eat in their entirety, without any processing or anything else. This basically includes all vegetables, most proteins, and healthy fats. Now, the other 20% of our diet is left for adjustments, adaptations, and creating some flexibility. Say you want to eat pizza or a hot dog, well, go ahead and eat it, just in controlled portions, so it doesn't exceed 20%. And this is an important rule. Why does it work? Because if we impose a strict and total ban for almost 70% of people, 68% to be exact, it leads to relapses. So out of 3 people who have strict restrictions, 2 will definitely cave, and only one will hold out, but they'll likely just cave later. Right, so there shouldn't be a total ban, but please, in moderate amounts, 20%, that's a fifth of your diet, can be reserved for some quote-unquote forbidden food or whatever. But the main part, 80%, should of course consist of whole foods. And then there's a hidden enemy. The hidden enemy is ultra-processed foods. That's the Western term. In our terms, these would be convenience foods. Convenience foods, in the broad sense of the word, we usually think of convenience foods as just fast food. But it's not just fast food, it's also, say, ready-made meals that just need microwaving or popping in the oven, or even just sweets and cookies, because according to this nutritional classification, they're considered ultra-processed since they have a long shelf life. To make that possible, they add a lot of preservatives, sweeteners, flavor enhancers, and all that other stuff. It's exactly this combination of substances that makes a product a convenience food. I mean, not just a ready-to-eat meal, but specifically something that's ultra-processed. And here's the thing, even on GLP-1, sweets and fast food reduce our body's sensitivity to the satiety hormone. The satiety hormone is actually glucagon-like peptide 1. So if you're using GLP-1, adding sweets or fast food actually neutralizes its effect and makes you more likely to overeat. That's why for people who eat, say, 2 or 3 servings of processed food a day, the effectiveness of these GLPs drops by a whole quarter, by 25%. And of course, that really does reduce the overall effect. So many people ask, I'm using it, for example, but I can't seem to lose weight, it's just stalled. Well, maybe you're eating processed food sometimes, and that negates the entire effect that should be happening from taking a medication like that. All right, let's move on. Next, let's talk about physical activity and working out. Usually, everyone says that cardio is very beneficial for losing weight. Yes, but when we're talking about GLP-1, then strength training is preferable and even better than cardio. And so, why are we talking about this? Right? Because if we take GLP-1 and don't exercise, then muscle loss also occurs, and muscles start to shrink and shrink and shrink. They can decrease by almost 40%. And this is a crucial point, so the solution would be to add maybe 2 or 3 workouts a week. It could be dumbbells, resistance bands, or bodyweight exercises. You don't necessarily need heavy gym equipment to incorporate strength training. And in addition to that, just 10 minutes of squats can accelerate fat loss by 17%. And that's a very significant number. So even if we just take one component, like breakfast, you see, 10 minutes of squats, a little bit of exercise, it definitely boosts the weight loss effect in general and adds to the GLP-1 effect. There's also another magic number, 8,000 steps a day. We usually talk about 10,000, but that's more of a psychological milestone, you know? So let's look at the research results. In reality, people who walk fewer than 5,000 steps, just 5,000, regain 50% more weight after stopping GLP-1. They regain 50% more, so you definitely need to get in at least 8,000 steps. Well, 10 is like an elective or an extra option. So even if we just take a 5-minute walk after eating, it already reduces sugar spikes better than a 30-minute walk in the morning or anything else. So walking after a meal is definitely better, more important, and more beneficial for weight loss than at any other time. Because it's right after eating that we need to burn off that sugar or store it away under the influence of insulin. Oh, the psychological aspects of weight loss are extremely important, and without them, it's very hard to make progress, especially for people who've gained a lot and need to lose not just 3 or 5 kilograms, but maybe 10, 15, or even 20. That's why we know for sure that keeping a food diary, simply recording what you eat, especially if done mindfully, has a fantastic effect, boosting weight loss by nearly 30%, 30% more. Meaning the weight comes off faster. Studies show that simply recording your food increases awareness and reduces automatic overeating. People using a nutrition tracker lose 3 to 5 kilograms more over 6 months than those who don't track at all. In a way, cognitive behavioral therapy also plays a role here. That's the work done with a psychologist. And just 4 sessions of CBT with a clear goal set for the therapist can reduce episodes of overeating and stress eating by about 40%. That's a significant number. So if you're serious about losing weight and you know you're a stress eater, then 4 sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy spaced about 2 weeks apart, which takes about 2 months total, will lead to a real reduction in those stress eating episodes. Besides, it's not just diet and physical activity that determine the outcome. There are 3 other major components. Those would be sleep, gut health, and genetics. Why am I mentioning these? Because if someone's sleep is poor, if they aren't rested or just don't sleep enough, then even the effectiveness of GLP-1 medications drops by 25%. 25%! Look, fast food cuts it by 25%, and poor sleep cuts it by another 25%. That's a 50% reduction in the GLP-1 effect right there. The effect of GLP-1 builds up in a cycle. Well, it's important to know why this happens, because if a person doesn't get enough sleep, the hunger hormone, ghrelin, increases by about 15%. And so, of course, GLPs can no longer control that feeling of fullness and appetite. Their effectiveness really decreases, because GLP-1 is an appetite blocker. And if we increase ghrelin and the hunger hormone through lack of sleep, then they just neutralize each other. The gut, well, that's also an important factor regarding weight loss. After all, if you look at it, both specifically and generally, the gut decides almost everything, because in people who have a diverse gut microbiome, not just having bifidobacteria or just having lactobacilli, or where the majority of the gut microbes aren't just staphylococcus, streptococcus, or even E. coli, but those who have a diverse zoo in there, the more animals there are, the more interesting the zoo is. The more different types of microflora, the more interesting this microflora is for the gut. And for those people where it's all the same, well, only 1, 2, or 3 types of microbes, for them, of course, these GLP-1 drugs work twice as slowly. What should you do? Well, you need to restore the diversity of the microflora. Then we remember that the gut needs 30 grams of fiber a day. That's fiber in its pure form. So we add fiber. 30 grams of pure fiber a day. If you translate that into food, say vegetables, fruits, greens, some grains, or nuts, it comes out to about 400 grams of vegetables. If we look at the whole diet, which for a healthy adult is about 1.5 kilograms, then less than a third of it should be plant-based food. And of course, you need to add fermented foods. But honestly, there's a trick here, because you have to know how to use them correctly. It's not like you drink a liter of kefir and eat a kilogram of sauerkraut. No, you still need to do it gradually and wisely. And then these fermented products, will create conditions for microflora diversity, and it will change. And let's get back to genetics. Genetics is also a very important component, because for some, GLP-1 drugs hardly help at all. In this trend, they buy these medicines because of it, and start using them, but there's no effect. And it turns out that, indeed, 15% of people have a variant of the TCF7L2 gene that reduces the response to GLP-1 use. That is, you inject it, but the potency from it is very low. And those who have a different variant of the TCF7L2 gene, they accordingly have a better response. So due to the body's own characteristics, the response can be stronger or weaker. Well, as we've already realized, sleep provides a quarter of the effect, and no fast food provides another quarter. So, of course, for such people, it's especially important to combine not just weight loss drugs, but also add a diet and add sports. So, let's briefly summarize the conclusions. And I'll have a provocative question for you. Conclusions. Drugs acting on GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide, those Ozempics and all the others, are a start, but not the finish. Because the optimal strategy should be composed of several parts. We take the drug, and protein, and strength exercises, and we add mindfulness, and we restore sleep. Then the effect, of course, won't keep you waiting. But if we don't change our lifestyle, that is, we only take the drug without protein, without strength training, without mindfulness, and without sleep, then, well, within 2 years for sure, the weight returns for most people. And we wouldn't want to resort to that, of course. So the future here will depend on how our study of microflora develops. Today, there's already 16S sequencing, which allows us to accurately select nutrition personally for a person, on how well or poorly we work through the psychological problems that we eat away at. And of course, it will depend on genetics, including the TCF7L2 gene, which is responsible for the sense of appetite and can regulate how strongly or weakly GLP-1 drugs help, and from the PNPLA3 gene, which is responsible for the rate of fat accumulation in the liver. Well, and the most important provocative question, probably, is that if, in essence, drugs acting on GLP-1 receptors mimic the satiety hormone and destroy our sense of hunger, thanks to this, we lose weight. Then, maybe soon, some, in quotes, smart food will appear, which will naturally stimulate the production of this very GLP-1. And here there are already some developments, studies on beta-glucans, which are found in oats, in mushrooms, and that they affect GLP-1. And what do you think about this? Please write. Maybe someone has already used GLP-1 and didn't get an effect, and now they'll find the reason for themselves why this is happening. Maybe someone is already using some food that also affects GLP-1 and is losing weight on it. Someone might share other tips. But if we're considering such a weight loss strategy where there's GLP-1, then the general plan of action should be this. First, of course, you need to discuss a combined approach with a doctor. That is, we make a combination of several components, which gives us the maximum result. Second, of course, you need to start with protein. Add 30 grams of protein for breakfast. Well, the simplest story. Look, an omelet, because there's a lot of protein there, egg white is generally good, and say cottage cheese. Third, you just need to add a couple of strength workouts a week. Even if you're at home, you can make it happen. For example, by choosing bodyweight exercises without extra weights, or maybe some bands or dumbbells, you can always find a way. Fourth, so you need to sleep at least 6 hours, but 7+ is even better. And this will boost the effect because the hunger hormone will be produced properly, rather than us just blocking it. GLP-1 is, of course, a breakthrough especially for people with obesity, with a very large excess weight, and with some additional accompanying problems, like bronchial asthma, or diabetes, or liver problems, or something else. But as with any tool, you need to know how to work with this tool correctly, and the result will depend not on whether you use it in principle or not, but on how you do it. So, of course, you need to approach this weight loss issue from different angles and involve all the components of weight loss. Then the results won't keep you waiting. Well then, I'll be waiting for your comments. Be sure to write, and see you soon. Subscribe to all social media, and please give this video a like. See you soon. Bye-bye.